good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whenever you are watching this video, let me welcome you all to our channel Future Endeavors. So this video is after a long time. Sorry for the interruptions. There have been some health issues for which we have not been able to upload any video. So we regret for that. I think we will be able to continue the uploading the videos from now. Okay. Again, thanks a lot for supporting us and also understanding the problems. Okay, so with that, let us begin. Today we will be discussing about a chapter which is in class 9 syllabus. We have almost finished all the chapters related to class 10. So today we will be discussing about a chapter which is in class 9. Okay, so what is the name of the chapter? Can you guess? Yes, definitely it is the first chapter of the class 9 physics syllabus, that is units and measurements. Okay, so make the heading units and measurements. Okay, so today we are going to discuss some very basic things that is very important from the point of view of physics. Okay, see, first of all, what are we actually dealing with physics? In physics we mainly deal with physical quantities, their measurements, their units and their related formulas. So first of all that we are going to discuss is, what do you understand by the term physical quantities? Okay, so quantities in physics we regard them as physical quantities as they are measurable. So what is physical quantities? So what is physical quantities? If I just try to define the term physical quantity, so what is physical quantity? Something that can be measured. Okay, so physical quantity is something that can be measured. Something that can be measured. Okay, that can be measured. Okay, so anything that can be measured can be regarded as physical quantity. Fine. Okay, like consider cell length, you can measure it. Mass, you can measure it. Volume, you can measure it. So all these things are physical quantities as they can be measured. So I think the term physical quantity is okay. Fine. Now in physics, when we are talking about physical quantities, if I try to classify the physical quantities, preliminarily we can classify the physical quantities as fundamental physical quantities and derived physical quantities. So if I want to classify this physical quantity, I will be getting two terms. One is fundamental physical quantity, okay, and the second is derived physical quantity, okay. So these are the two physical quantities that we can classify, okay. So fundamental and derived. Fine. So what are these fundamental physical quantities and what are these derived physical quantities? Okay, before just discussing about the fundamental and derived physical quantity, let me just discuss another term which is measurement. In the definition of physical quantity, you have said that anything that we can measure is a physical quantity, isn't it? So that is, you need to know about the term measurement. What is actually measurement? So I think you have noted this. Okay, so I am just raising it off to discuss the term measurement. Okay, so what is measurement? Now let us come to the fact what is measurement. Okay, measurement. Now see, measurement is actually a process. Measurement is actually a process. So you can write it definitely, it's actually a process. So a process. And what do we do in the process? In measurement, actually we compare a physical quantity with a standard value. We compare any physical quantity with a standard value. So measurement is actually the process in which comparison is done. So a process in which comparison is done, okay, of a physical quantity with a standard quantity. So comparison is done with a standard quantity. So these are the terms that you need to have in mind. Standard quantity of same nature. This is also important, of same nature. Okay, so whenever you are talking about measurement, you need to have these three terms in your mind. Process, it's a process of comparison of the physical quantity, of any kind of physical quantity with a standard quantity of the same nature. Now, we will be just breaking up these terms and discussing what it actually means. Okay, so measurement as a process, I think you can understand. You are actually going through a process of comparing. Say, let me give you an example. Say, if you want to measure the length of, consider a rod. Okay. Now, if you do not have any standard measuring device like a ruler, a measuring tape, these are the standard measuring devices. You have already read all these things. If you do not have such standard measuring devices, what you do, you can actually take a piece of string, okay, and by taking that piece of string, you can actually standardize it out. What does that mean? You take a piece of ring, you take a piece of string, and say that okay, this length is a standard length. We will compare the length of any object. Say you want to say there are two rods, there are two iron rods. You want to say which iron rod is longer than the other. In this kind of discussion, when you want to determine which iron rod is longer, what you need to do, you need to have a standard measuring device. If you don't have such a standard measuring device, what can you do is that you take a piece of string and standardize it, that okay, this length of the string is a standard, it's fixed, it's having a fixed value. So with the help of the string, you can measure the length of both the rods. Okay, isn't it? You can measure the length of both the rods. Say you measure the length of the first rod using the string, and you find out that the length of the first rod is say 3 times the length of the string. And when you measure the length of the second rod, you find out that it is actually 5 times the length of the string. So I hope this basic thing is clear. So now you can easily tell your friend that which rod is longer. So what have you done? In order to determine which rod is longer, you have gone through the process of measurement. Actually, you have compared the length of the two rods with a standard quantity. That is the piece of the string here. So I think the concept of measurement is clear. In measurement, what are we doing? It's a process in which we are comparing any physical quantity with a standard physical quantity of the same nature. Now, what does it mean? That same nature, when you are trying to measure the length of the rod, obviously you can take a piece of string and say okay, so the rod is this times this length of the string, length of the rod. But can you just compare the length while determining the length of the rod? Can you take say a certain mass of sugar and say that the length of the rod is say 5 times the mass of the sugar? No, that is not possible. So that kind of comparison is not valid, isn't it? So that is why we are mentioning the term that while you are comparing with the standard quantity, that standard quantity must be of the same nature as the physical quantity you are trying to measure. Okay, so I think the concept of measurement is clear. Fine. So this is the process of measurement. Now, while you are talking of measurement, we have said a standard quantity. So focus on this word. You have said that standard quantity. Now, you know, the standard quantity is actually what we call a unit. Okay, so the standard quantity is actually what you call a unit. So unit is nothing but a standard quantity with which you are trying to compare the physical quantity. So we have some standard quantities with which we make the comparison, and those standard quantities are regarded as units which do not actually change over a period of time or change from place to place. Okay, they remain same. Those standard values, those standard quantities remain same irrespective of time or places. Okay, so these are the units. Fine. So I think the concept is clear. Okay, now let's go back to the types of physical quantities. We are discussing the types of physical quantities. There are two types, we have said as earlier, fundamental and derived. So let us see what are the fundamental physical quantities. Okay, if you have still confusion in your mind regarding the terms measurement or unit, please pause the video, move back a little, review it once again. You will definitely understand what the concept is all about. Okay, fine. Now let us say we want to know what is a fundamental physical quantity. So what is a fundamental physical quantity? Let us discuss fundamental physical quantity. So there are certain physical quantities which do not depend on other physical quantities, or rather you can say which are independent of any other physical quantity. Okay, so what are fundamental physical quantities? Those physical quantity which are not dependent on any other physical quantity or which are unique in nature. They are actually self-dependent. Okay, so fundamental physical quantity can be regarded as those quantity. Okay, so quantity, let us say quantity, use the term quantity here, so I am writing quantity that are independent. That is, you do not need any other physical quantity to express this kind of physical quantity. Those can be regarded as fundamental physical quantity. They are independent of other quantity. For example, if you consider say length, you consider mass, you consider time. Okay, so actually this length, mass, when you say you are trying to figure out that say the mass of certain amount of sugar is 5 kg, do you need the help of other physical quantities like length or volume or time to express the mass of the sugar? No, you don't need so. So the length can be regarded as also fundamental physical quantity, mass also fundamental physical quantity. So the concept of fundamental physical quantity is nothing but those are independent, they are self-dependent. They do not need any other physical quantity to express them. So those are the fundamental physical quantity. Now, what are derived physical quantity? So when you talk of derived physical quantity, so I think many of you have been by now able to guess what is derived physical quantity. So just pause the video and try to answer on your own and then match the answer with the video. So what is derived physical quantity? Derived physical quantity, so definitely derived physical quantity are those quantities that are actually dependent on other physical quantities. They cannot just simply express on their own. They need to depend on other physical quantities. Okay, so quantity that depends on two or more fundamental physical quantity. Depends on two or more fundamental quantity. So this kind of quantity are regarded as derived physical quantity. So I think the concept is clear. Derived physical quantity. Okay. So definitely derived physical quantity, you need to understand that these are actually dependent. They are not self-independent. Okay. So for example, when you consider, when you are trying to express, example, when you are trying to express speed, okay, speed. So for speed, you need to express the speed in terms of length as well as time. So length and time both are fundamental physical quantities, and in order to express speed, what you need to do, you need to take the help of length as well as time. Okay, so these are the derived physical quantities. Now you might be guessing, so how can we just identify a quantity as fundamental or derived? For that you need to know that if I consider fundamental physical quantities, there are only 7 fundamental physical quantities. Initially there were 3 fundamental physical quantities recognized. With time we are able to recognize 7 fundamental physical quantities, and additionally there are 2 supplementary fundamental physical quantities. So other than those 7 plus 2, all the other physical quantities that you interact, that you come across, will be derived physical quantity. So for that you need to just remember the list of the fundamental physical quantities. So what are the fundamental physical quantities? Let me just list out those fundamental physical quantities. Okay. So first one is obviously length. Second one is mass. Third one is time. Fourth one is current. Fifth one is temperature. Okay, length, mass, time, current, temperature. Sixth one is luminous intensity. Luminous intensity. And seventh one is amount of substance. Amount of substance. So many of you know the first 5 physical quantities. You have a good idea about this: length, mass, time, current and temperature. What about this luminous intensity or amount of substance? See, luminous intensity is actually a measure of the brightness of a light source, intensity of a light source. So that measurement, that physical quantity is said to be or regarded as luminous intensity. Whereas amount of substance, what does that regard? You know that every matter consists of certain molecules or atoms or ions, say. So the number of molecules or atoms or ions contained in that particular matter is regarded as the amount of substance. Okay, so these are the 7 fundamental physical quantities, and later on there were 2 more physical quantities. One is angle and other one is solid angle. Okay, these are called the supplementary fundamental physical quantities. So these are regarded as supplementary fundamental physical quantities. Supplementary. Okay, so this 7 plus 2, these 9 physical quantities are the only physical quantities which are fundamental in nature. Other than this, any other physical quantity that you encounter, you can regard those physical quantity as derived, because you will see in some way or the other those derived quantities will depend on these 7 plus 2, that is 9 physical quantities to express themselves. So those are regarded as derived, and these 7 plus 2 are regarded as fundamental physical quantities. Okay, so I think the concept of classification of the physical quantity is clear, the concept of physical quantity is clear, measurement unit. Okay, so today we will be stopping our video here. In the next class we will be discussing about the units, okay, standard units and the various units associated with these physical quantities. Okay, so till then, till the next class, goodbye. Please do study well, and if you have any query, please do mention in the comment box. We will be happy to solve your problem. Okay, thank you, goodbye.